An airport is the last place anyone expects to witness a war of worlds. But that morning, inside the crowded international terminal, something extraordinary unfolded. A moment so humiliating, so absurd, so unfair, that everyone who saw it froze in disbelief. It began with an insult so sharp it cut the air, spoken in a language most people in that room couldn't even identify. But the cleaner understood every word, and the billionaire, dressed in a tailored suit worth more than her entire year of salary, never imagined that his attempt to shame her would expose a truth he was never prepared to face. He stood tall, dripping arrogance, the way others sweat under pressure. An Indian billionaire with a global empire, a jet waiting outside, and a superiority complex polished to perfection. His Mandarin was flawless, practiced, weaponized. He used it like a blade, assuming she would never understand it, assuming she was beneath him, assuming she was too small, too uneducated, too insignificant to fight back. He had no idea who he was speaking to. She pushed her cleaning cart slowly, the wheels squeaking with the familiar rhythm she had heard for years. Life had made her invisible, or so everyone believed. What he didn't know, what no one in that airport suspected, was that she understood Mandarin better than he did. Not just the words, the intention behind them, the venom hidden in each syllable. She had lived in places he would never dare to step into, worked in homes where she heard languages from every corner of the world, learned to survive by absorbing everything others thought she couldn't. When he insulted her, he thought he was creating a private humiliation, but the moment those phrases left his mouth, the world shifted. Something awakened inside her that had been silent for years. She paused, gripped the cart, lifted her head slowly, and looked directly at him. It was the first time he truly saw her. Not as a cleaner, not as a background figure, but as a woman with eyes that carried history, fire, and a quiet intelligence he could not measure. The room held its breath. Passengers pretended not to look, but the tension pulled their attention like gravity. Even the airport staff froze behind their counters. He smirked, believing he had won, believing she would bow her head and walk away the way the world trained her to. But the next moment, the moment she opened her mouth and responded, would go down as the single most shocking reaction anyone in that airport had ever witnessed. Because she didn't just understand him, she answered him in fluent Mandarin, perfect pronunciation, perfect tone, perfect confidence, and what she said back cut deeper than any insult he had ever delivered. The moment the room stopped breathing, when insults turned into a deadly mistake, he believed he was untouchable the moment he walked into the terminal. Men like him always did. He moved through the airport as if the floor had been polished just for his shoes, as if every sign, every sound, every person existed only to serve the path he walked. The private security, the entourage, the subtle glances of admiration from strangers fed an ego so bloated it had forgotten what humility looked like. But all it took was one cleaner, one miscalculated insult, one single moment of arrogance to expose the cracks in his carefully constructed identity. He stood in line at the VIP counter, irritated by the slightest inconvenience, his voice dripping with impatience as he barked orders to his assistants. When the cleaner bent down near his feet to wipe a spill someone else had left behind, he didn't see her as a person. He saw her as an obstacle. He stepped aside with exaggerated annoyance, clicked his tongue, and then, without hesitation, unleashed a full sentence in flawless Mandarin. The words weren't just insulting, they were cruel. The kind of cruelty delivered by people who think their wealth grants them the right to be inhumane. Words meant to belittle her existence, her job, her worth. Words designed to sting without leaving evidence. Words he assumed would stay secret because he believed she could never understand them. But the moment those syllables left his mouth, something in the atmosphere shifted. The cleaner stopped mid-motion. Her hand froze over the cloth. Her back straightened. It wasn't the reaction he expected. He anticipated embarrassment, retreat, silence. Instead, he felt the temperature of the room change, subtle but undeniable. She slowly rose, her eyes lifting from the floor to meet his. For the first time, he saw her face clearly, not distracted, not submissive, but focused, sharply focused, as if she had just watched him step into a trap he didn't know he had set. The billionaire's chest tightened. He didn't know why. Passengers nearby felt it too. Conversation softened. People exchanged glances. The arrogance in his posture clashed with the quiet confidence building in hers. He didn't understand what was happening, but she did. She had faced men like him before. Men who underestimated people for sport. Men who believed the world bowed to them by default. And she had learned long ago that the most dangerous thing you can give a person like that is a mirror. She wiped her hands on her apron, took one slow step forward, and spoke. Her Mandarin cut through the room like a blade. Fluent, precise, sharp enough to gut the pride right out of him. What she said wasn't an insult. It was worse. It was truth. Truth spoken so directly, so cleanly, that the billionaire's face drained of color before she even finished the first sentence. She dismantled every word he had thrown at her, revealing just how deeply she understood not only the language, but the intention behind it. She responded with the kind of clarity that left no space for denial. People turned their heads, some covered their mouths. Others stared openly now, the shock too strong to hide. The assistants froze, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they didn't exist. Even the airport staff stopped typing, their eyes flicking between them like spectators at a match they never expected to see. The billionaire tried to recover, tried to reclaim the towering identity he had spent his life projecting. But the damage was already done. His insult hadn't just failed, it had exposed him. It revealed his cruelty, his insecurity, his assumption that no one outside his world could understand him. And worst of all, he realized that the woman he had insulted had far more intelligence, awareness, and restraint than he had ever possessed. He opened his mouth to respond, but she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a tone that only he could hear. And what she whispered next didn't just humiliate him, it terrified him. Because she didn't only understand Mandarin, she knew exactly who he was, and she knew something he had prayed no one would ever discover. If you want to keep hearing this story and don't want to miss what happens next, make sure to subscribe now. Your support helps this channel bring more suspense, drama, and unexpected twists. The woman he underestimated, and the secret that shattered his arrogance. The billionaire expected her to break. He expected tears, apologies, or at the very least, silence. That was how people usually reacted when he attacked them with the sharp edges of his multilingual arrogance. But the cleaner didn't step back. She stepped closer. Her presence alone dismantled the hierarchy he relied on to feel powerful. Her voice was steady, her shoulders squared, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't intimidated by the weight of his wealth or the size of his entourage. Instead, she looked at him the way people look at a puzzle that suddenly solved itself. Her Mandarin response echoed in his mind, replaying with cruel precision. It wasn't only that she spoke the language, it was how she spoke it, with fluency, with cultural nuance, with the kind of mastery that could only come from deeper experience than he possessed. He swallowed hard, stunned. His pride tried to reassemble itself, but she wasn't finished with him yet. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't seek an audience. Yet everyone in that airport could feel the shift in power. She wasn't just responding to an insult. She was revealing something that made him question everything he assumed about her. She told him she recognized his accent, not the Indian cadence, the Mandarin one. She pinpointed the exact region his teacher must have come from, the specific linguistic habits of someone trained in elite circles. Her analysis was so precise that even he felt exposed. Standing in front of her, he suddenly realized she wasn't simply someone who learned Mandarin. She was someone who understood people, and that terrified him more than her fluency. He tried to regain control by lifting his chin, straightening his suit jacket, attempting to look down on her the way he always had. But she didn't flinch. She had seen men like him crumble under the weight of their own secrets before. Some hid their fears behind money, others hid behind language. He hid behind both. She leaned slightly closer. Her tone softened, but the softness was deceiving. It held razor blades. And then she delivered the line that made his stomach twist. She didn't just understand Mandarin, she understood his Mandarin. His specific choice of words, the dialect he tried to disguise, the cultural references only someone from a very particular circle would know. And her next sentence struck him where he was weakest. She told him that she had once worked in a house where the same dialect was spoken. A house filled with political tension, hidden wealth, and people who knew how to use languages as weapons. A house that had ties to powerful families, including the one he thought he had cut ties with years ago. His blood ran cold. She knew the people he avoided. She knew the circles he escaped. She knew the past he spent his entire life burying under money and distance. His breath faltered as her words tightened around him like a trap. She saw the panic cross his face and allowed him no room to hide. She explained in perfect Mandarin that the insult he used was one favored by a particular man, a man who had once held power over him, a man he betrayed, a man who would never forgive him. The billionaire's pupils shrank. How could she possibly know that? How could a cleaner know a piece of his life that even journalists failed to uncover? Her eyes held the answer. She wasn't who he thought she was. She never had been. She didn't tell him everything. She didn't need to. But in that moment, he understood one devastating truth. She knew him, and she knew exactly why he was running. The assistants hovered nervously around him, whispering questions he couldn't answer. Passengers exchanged bewildered looks. The cleaner stood perfectly still, her expression calm, her intelligence blazing through the uniform that hid it. He felt his identity unraveling, and she wasn't done yet. If you want more stories like this, and don't want to miss the continuation of this one, subscribe now and stay with us. Your support helps this channel bring more suspense, drama, and unexpected twists. When the billionaire's world collapses, the truth he never wanted anyone to know, he had spent his entire life constructing a fortress out of money, power, and distance. Every decision, every investment, every ruthless alliance had been carefully crafted to keep his past buried under layers of luxury. He believed that if he rose high enough in status, high enough in wealth, high enough in reputation, no one would ever reach the parts of his life he wanted erased. But the moment the cleaner spoke, that carefully built fortress cracked. She didn't shout. She didn't embarrass him publicly. Her tone was almost gentle, yet each word delivered the precision of a surgeon slicing open a wound. And with every sentence, he felt pieces of his identity falling away, revealing a truth he had refused to confront. He wasn't in control. He had never been in control. His entire power depended on people not knowing who he truly was, and she was someone who could expose everything. His assistants noticed his tension immediately. Their confident postures dissolved into panic as they saw the billionaire, their employer, losing the composure that defined him. They whispered frantically, asking what was wrong, but he ignored them. His eyes were locked on her, desperately searching for a crack in her expression, a sign that she was bluffing. But there was no bluff. She had spoken details no outsider could know. He asked her, quietly trembling, how she knew where he had been raised, how she knew the dialect of the family he once lived with, how she knew the name of the man he betrayed. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply answered in perfect Mandarin, I was in that house before you were ever wealthy enough to be invited into it." His blood turned to ice. The airport noise faded into a distant hum. His vision narrowed. Memories he had forced himself to forget resurfaced like ghosts, clawing their way out of the dark. He remembered the house, the tension, the unspoken rules, the fear, the power struggles between men who controlled politicians and industries, men who controlled him, men who owned him long before he purchased his own empire. He thought he had escaped them, but she knew them. Worse, she survived what he merely witnessed. She revealed a truth he had buried deeply. He wasn't born powerful. He was shaped by powerful men, molded, used, and when the time came, he betrayed one of them to save himself. A betrayal that forced him to leave the country, change continents, build an empire far from the shadows of his past. Now those shadows stood in front of him, disguised as a cleaner he had underestimated. He tried to speak, but his throat tightened. He felt exposed, vulnerable, in a way he hadn't felt since he was young and powerless. The cleaner saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she once tasted in her own life. And she didn't soften. She simply spoke the truth he needed to hear. "You think your money protects you? It doesn't. Language didn't protect you. Arrogance didn't protect you. The only reason you're standing here is because I kept quiet until now." His heart thundered against his ribs. Her words pierced through every layer of pride he had built around himself. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the woman he insulted had lived through storms far more violent than anything he had faced. Then came the final blow. She told him he wasn't the only one running from that man. She had escaped him too, but not by betrayal, by surviving, by disappearing so quietly that even the powerful forgot she existed. Until now. The assistant stared in horror as the billionaire, usually a pillar of confidence, looked like a man watching his past rise from the dead. He asked her what she wanted, but she shook her head. "It's not about what I want," she said. "It's about what you deserve." Her words hit him harder than any insult, harder than any revelation, harder than any truth he had ever been forced to swallow. Because deep down, he knew she was right. He had treated the world as if he were the only one who mattered. But now he faced the one woman who knew the version of him he wanted forgotten, and she wasn't finished with him. If you want the next chapter of this story and others like it, make sure to subscribe now. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us continue bringing unexpected twists, emotional revelations, and dramatic truths to your screen. The answer that humiliated a tyrant, when fluency became a weapon. No one in that airport had ever witnessed a reversal of power so fast, so sharp, and so devastating. The billionaire, who minutes earlier strutted with the arrogance of someone convinced the world revolved around him, now stood frozen as the cleaner dismantled him with nothing but words. Words spoken in a language he believed belonged exclusively to powerful men like himself. Words he once used as a shield, now turned against him with surgical precision. He tried to speak again, desperate to regain even a fragment of authority, but she stepped forward first. Her voice remained steady, almost calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. She answered him in Mandarin once more, this time louder, confident, and unrestrained. Every syllable struck him like a blow he couldn't defend against. She didn't insult him. She exposed him, exposed his fear, exposed his past, exposed the truth he spent years burying under silk suits and private jets. The crowd reacted instantly. People who spoke Mandarin gasped audibly. They couldn't believe a cleaner not only understood him, but responded with mastery. Even those who didn't understand the language felt the emotional violence of her words. Her tone didn't tremble. Her posture didn't shrink. She stood as if she had been waiting for this moment, not for revenge, but for justice. The billionaire felt something inside him collapse. He had built his identity on dominance, on control, on the ability to crush others with sophistication and multilingual superiority. But now, in front of a crowd, his weapon had been taken from him and used against him by someone he considered insignificant. He attempted a weak laugh to mask his panic, but it sounded strained, artificial, ridiculous. His assistants exchanged fearful glances. They had never seen him lose control. They had never seen him humbled. They had never seen him confronted by someone who truly understood the version of him he hid from the world. She took another step forward. This time, she didn't speak about his past. She spoke about his present. In Mandarin, she told him exactly why his insult revealed more about him than about her. She explained that only men who carry deep insecurity resort to attacking those beneath them. She explained that true power doesn't need to be loud. She explained that wealthy men who mock the working class reveal a hole so deep inside themselves that no amount of money can fill it. Every word hit him like a blade. He tried to interrupt her, but she lifted her hand and he fell silent. The assistants, which usually jumped to defend him, did nothing. They were too shaken to intervene. They sensed instinctively that this confrontation was something bigger than status, bigger than money, bigger than the billionaire himself. Then she delivered the answer that broke him completely. Still speaking perfect Mandarin, she said, "You insulted me thinking I would be blind to your meaning, but the only blind person here is you. You don't see people, you don't see danger, you don't even see yourself." The terminal erupted into whispers. It didn't matter that only a portion of the people understood Mandarin. The emotional force behind her words transcended language. Everyone could feel the seismic shift in the air. The billionaire's breathing turned shallow. His hands trembled, subtle enough for most to miss. But not her. She saw everything. She always had. That was the difference between them. He lived in a world built on illusions. She lived in a world built on reality. And then came the moment he feared most. She switched to English, loud enough for everyone around to hear. She repeated only 5 words of what he had originally said to her in Mandarin, translating his original insult clearly. Everyone heard it. Everyone understood. Everyone judged him. His public image, crafted meticulously over years, shattered in seconds. Gasps echoed around him. A woman covered her mouth. A man shook his head. Airport staff exchanged horrified looks. The assistant stepped away, not wanting to be associated with the fallout. He felt naked, exposed, humiliated by the very language he used as a weapon. And she wasn't done. She took a deep breath, maintained her posture, and asked him one final question in English, one that pierced through all the layers of pride he had left. "Now tell me, would you have said those words if you believed I understood you? Or do you only attack the people you think cannot fight back?" The billionaire had no answer, because the truth was written all over his face. If you're enjoying this story and want more dramatic twists, emotional revelations, and powerful confrontations, share this video and like it now. It helps YouTube spread stories that bring depth, reflection, and entertainment into the world. The billionaire's breaking point. When humiliation becomes transformation, the airport terminal had become a courtroom without a judge, and every witness standing nearby waited for the billionaire's response. But he had none. His mouth opened, then closed again. His certainty shattered, his arrogance drained from him like color from a dying flame. For the first time in his adult life, he stood without the armor of status, without the protection of money, without the shield of language. He stood only as a man, and a deeply flawed one. She didn't enjoy his collapse. She didn't gloat. Her expression remained steady, almost painfully calm. She wasn't there to humiliate him for sport. She was the kind of person life had beaten enough times to understand that humiliation loses meaning when it has no purpose. But this moment did have a purpose. It stripped him of the illusions he had depended on for too long. The illusions he believed made him safe. The illusions that kept him blind. He shifted his weight, visibly shaken, eyes darting across the terminal in a desperate attempt to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Moments earlier, he walked through the airport as if he owned it. Now he wished he could disappear inside it. Every person around him held a piece of judgment in their eyes. Not because they had seen an insult, but because they had seen the true man behind the money. She watched him closely. She recognized that expression. She had worn it once. The expression of someone forced to confront their own reflection and finally see the ugliness they tried to deny. She had survived her reckoning. Now it was his turn. He attempted a half-hearted apology, but she raised her hand, not aggressively, just firmly, silencing him. She explained something he had never considered, that respect cannot be bought, and dignity cannot be confiscated by those who think status gives them the right to crush others. Her words were simple, but they cut deeper than any insult he had ever used. You thought I was beneath you because I cleaned floors. But you don't see how many floors I climbed, that you could never survive. The crowd felt the weight of her truth. He felt it even more. She told him that she didn't just learn Mandarin, she lived it. She worked for families whose power made his empire look fragile. She heard secrets whispered behind locked doors, watched deals unfold that could destroy entire industries, witnessed betrayals that shaped nations. She learned languages because her life depended on it, not because she wanted to decorate her resume with sophistication. He, on the other hand, used language to elevate himself above others. She used it to survive. And the difference between those two realities stood naked before him. His eyes began to water, not from sadness, but from the violent impact of truth hitting a wall he spent his whole life constructing. He wasn't crying. Men like him didn't cry in public, but something inside him was cracking with enough force to be seen. Then she did something no one expected. She softened, not out of pity, out of wisdom. She leaned in and told him, in Mandarin, something only he could hear. Her voice lowered, carrying a quiet gravity. You speak like a man who has forgotten where he came from, but I speak like a woman who remembers everything. His breath caught. He understood the depth behind those words. She wasn't just calling out his cruelty. She was calling out his fear. Because beneath all the wealth, beneath all the power, beneath all the insults, he had been running from a past he didn't want to face. And she had recognized it instantly, because she had survived her own. He lowered his head, not out of shame alone, but out of recognition. She wasn't just a cleaner. She was a mirror, one that reflected the version of him he didn't want the world to see. And then came the twist that silenced the entire terminal. She introduced herself not with her first name, but her full name, a name he recognized, a name tied to the same house from his past, a name connected to the same man he betrayed, a name he never expected to hear again. The billionaire staggered backward as if she had struck him. Everything inside him collapsed like a dynasty built on sand. And before he could even ask what she wanted, she gave him the answer that changed the entire meaning of the confrontation. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to warn you. They found you. The billionaire's knees nearly buckled. The assistants gasped. The terminal closed in around them. She stepped back, took hold of her cleaning cart, and spoke the last line like a sentence delivered by fate. If you want to survive what's coming, you're going to need someone who speaks your language and theirs. If you want this story to continue, if you want the next chapter of this confrontation, share this video and like it now. It helps YouTube understand that this channel brings depth, tension, and reflection to a world that needs it.